Good morning. Welcome to the lecture around revision for the test in week 18. I'm going to be going through these multiple choice and short answer questions today and hopefully use these to supplement your own study. I suggest that you also use the sheet that I gave you on Google Classroom with the list of the different topics that we've done this semester in conjunction with your own notes, your revision over your assessments and the materials associated with those, as well as the flex work and classwork that we have completed. Let's get started. So for multiple choice, I am going to be putting up an answer key for that for you, but really what you needed to be looking at for all of this was human rights and how they work, as well as a focus on the Constitution and the Racial Discrimination Act. If you have a good understanding about them alongside court hierarchy, you should have a really good understanding about all the different bits and pieces associated with this topic. Now let's jump into the short answer questions because you can refer to the multiple choice answer key that I will post on Google Classroom in conjunction with this video. So for question 1, you had 4 marks to look at outlining the process of a bill becoming a law, using this in particular as an example. So for this, you get 1 mark for each of these to a maximum of 4. So you would have to look at the origin of the idea of the law, that is, the current legal framework is not working to prevent crime on the docks, in this case. There'd be consideration in Cabinet followed by a drafting of the bill, followed by introducing the bill into the Parliament through the House of Reps. There'd be debate, and then three readings, and then a repetition of this process through the Senate. It would also go to the committees for investigation, and then if it needed amendments, it would return to the House of Reps. When it was approved by the Senate, when it finally gets there and gets the tick, it'd be sent to the Governor-General to get royal assent, and then it would finally become law. Of course, you would have to refer to this waterfront corruption cancer article that I've given you, this case study, in order to get the 4 marks here, as it does ask you to use it. Explaining the difference between rules, laws and customs should be something that's pretty straightforward for you now. We did do it at the beginning of the semester, and we did look at this idea that laws are part of legislation and therefore are legally enforced. Rules are these non-legal rules that occur at many different levels. It may be at a sports club, it may be in your family, might be at a college, wherever it is, they're not legally enforceable unless connected to a law. And then finally, customs are anything that's sort of traditional. You might want to go out to a certain place on a special holiday. You may observe a religious holiday or something like that, but it's not a rule or a law. It is a custom to a group of people. Through the division of powers in this question 3, you would have to talk about how the division of powers in the Constitution regulates the relationship and the role of the state and Commonwealth government, that is, ensuring that they have the exclusive, concurrent and residual powers, how they operate, and basically why they exist through the division of powers. For the division of powers, I'd also like you to talk about the different levels of government that exist and how they work with each other. Alrighty. For the ACMA law, for the first one, you would have to look at the federal government creating the ACMA as a statutory authority through the Australian Communications and Media Authority Act 2005, and that would be worth 1 mark. You can find that information in the case study that I gave you. In the second one, you would have to reference these 3 points to get the full 3 marks. The ACMA has the power to ensure political independence. There's expert understanding of the area. And finally, it frees up political and parliament time. For the final one, you should be looking at the fact that representative government is government and laws that reflect the opinions of the majority of Australians. Those making the regulation in statutory authorities are not elected, therefore regulation does not reflect the views of the public and is not representative government. In the Sea Submerged land case, for this first question here, out of 2 marks, you would have to reference this case and talk about the fact that the Constitution in Australia empowers the High Court to make decisions regarding the interpretation of the Constitution. Now, the High Court interpreted the Constitution in favour of the Commonwealth, therefore it was carrying out its constitutional function. For this story, for number 6, you would have to talk about this fear that if they remained in the nation they were to be persecuted, and that they were persecuted because of their religion, And the fact that they have nothing coming here, no family, no money, pretty much nothing but him himself, that would qualify him as a refugee. Now, we haven't done a lot of study into refugees, but we have done study into human rights, and this plays off that very well. For Maya's story, you would have to look at the rights to education, the rights to self-determination. Really, she's just been denied education. She does know how to read and write, but it did stop at grade 4. And that discrimination based on her sex, as well as her brother did finish school and went to work, whereas she had to stay home and do all the chores, and her younger brothers also go to school. So it's the right to education and the right to freedom from discrimination. In this case, you would be looking at the fact that, for one, Dr. Hanif was detained and questioned for 12 days without charge, which goes against our human rights of detention. And then finally, the charges that were made were based on a SIM card in a different country, which really doesn't connect into Australia's jurisdiction necessarily. Finally, the bigger mark question, the 6th marker, looks at this mandatory detention policy and about how it could be a breach of our international human rights obligations. So you would have to look at the international human rights law that we discussed around human rights, and about how people have the right to be free from detention and free from harm, and look at, in this particular case study, how those connect in there. You would definitely need to reference this case study. I would be expecting that you quote it and then use it to explain how we are breaching our human rights obligations under the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Finally, this is something that we did in class, explaining Section 109 of the Constitution. That is looking at when the state and the Commonwealth clash, the Commonwealth wins when it comes to creating laws. The external powers are looking at non-domestic laws. And then finally, Croom versus Tasmania is the High Court fulfilling its constitutional role as it ultimately interprets the Constitution and makes sure that as the final court of appeal, it is ultimately making judgments on its jurisdiction and whether the Constitution does carry this and cover it. I hope this covered some of what you've done and helped you on your journey to studying. On Monday, we'll go through some more revision and we'll do a few activities around helping you prep for Tuesday.